planner and an urban designer, practicing in the private sector.
Okay.
Yeah. Because of I think as an urban designer, it's you do more urban design work, if I may say, if you are in the private sector, than if you are in a public sector. You don't find a lot of urban designers practicing urban design work. Really, in the public sector, in the city, because most of the work is really outsourced, right, to consultants, right? So it's outsourced to consultants. You get consultants to actually do the work, and then you are essentially the project manager.
Town planning is a very diverse degree to have, because we really do fall into many disciplines and many career paths, which is quite interesting.
There's something that always comes back to me that Nobile had said.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a point like she was very irritated with the class, presenting something, and she said something to the effect of town planning is not knowing a little bit about everything. It's knowing a lot about everything. So you kind of I think it's overwhelming. Yes, it is. It should be, because you need to know a lot about everything. It takes you anywhere, especially if you are interested in problem solving.
Yes.
Right? Then there's so many problems in different industries and in different spaces. And that's what I think this planning degree helps us to do. It helps us to it helped us to almost rein in our thought process, workflow, in a way that helps to problem solve, right? So if that, to me, there's so many issues, man. So there's a lot of holes and gaps that you can fill as a town planner, and you just have to have that itch to want to do that, right? So depending on what your interests are.
Is music an impact on your life, or like your everyday habits and routines? Like, do you listen to a lot of music? Are you a big music fan? Well, I like to call them music heads. Or are you a bit passive when it comes to music?
Yeah, music is very important to me. Very, very important. But I wouldn't say I'm a music head. I listen to, like, it's not a thing, but it became a thing in my work with Bantu Lab. I'm not sure if you know Bantu Lab, the collective.
No.
Yeah, so Bantu Lab is a collective of like-minded architects, town planners, urban designers, who we all met, man, when it became a collective at Wits, right? And then we've essentially tried to take this, the collective, in ways, because we were struggling with how to make sense of our degrees in ways that are problem solving to the spaces that we live in, right? So we started to think about different things that are affecting us in varsity, and then do that and solving them there, right? In urban design, planning, coming together and thinking about issues and making it just trying to make things happen in the school that help the students, but also help us be our experience there better. Because you'd find that, like, you might know that we spend a lot of time in that building. John,
so much time in that building.
And the CAD labs, and it was just difficult. It's a difficult environment to be, especially with and there's so many interesting people in that building, where the spaces was not the space, and the way the degree was structured at the time was not really conducive to almost like a learning environment for us, right? So, and it was that fees must fall era. So there was a lot of emotion, drive to make a difference, right? And we will also think, how do we also get involved in the cry for fees to fall, right? How do we also think about ways that we can? So we were looking at different ways to see the city in in ways that were not only exciting for us, but
Mhm.
in ways that people in our generations were interested in, right? And music was one of those that lens, yeah, if I may, to look at this. So how do we look at the city in ways that that is, I mean, it's responsive to us, but it's also responsive to the youth, which is, I think, a very important way, a very, very important thing to do, especially with the kind of demographic structure that we have in not only in the country but in the world, right? These are the people that are using the city. So how do we look at the city in ways that open up issues that are important to them? So music was one of the ways that we chose to look at the city. So what we did was we looked at how we looked at Go music. So we looked at Go music. Go music was doing the rounds back then. Gom was the thing to do. Yeah. So we looked at Gom and Gom culture and how Gom specialized itself in the city. And we got to talk to a lot of DJs, diverse DJs, not only in Johannesburg but also in Durban. You look at Durban in particular, that's where really it originated from. So it was just like fun, man. But it was very interesting, and the results and the findings that we were able, and the things that conversation we were able to open up through that lens were quite interesting way of looking at the city and what's important to those people.
Okay, that's actually quite interesting because I never would have thought that it would have been such a heavy or significant tool in this organization you guys made, especially in the time of Fees May Fall. But I also think it was such a creative, like something that we all would understand and all could relate to, because music really is such an impactful and like powerful tool because it's so expressive. And honestly, anyone and everyone, no matter how old or where you come from or how much money you have or your lifestyle, everyone relates to music. Perhaps not the same way, but we can all have some sort of a common. But besides that, in your own personal life, would you say music is that significant to you as well?
I mean, I think it's important. I think, music, I think for me at least is it keeps you going, man. There's something about it that helps me keep going. Yeah, and when you're even when yeah, especially in tough times, you need music. It's something that's important to me because it lifts me up personally to continue doing the work, or focus, right? There's so many distractions as well, and I think at times music is the one thing that can always bring you back to and center you, get you get your head on head straight or concentrated into one thing. So I think, yeah, music is important to me in that way. Urban designer, a young urban designer in the city, right? Because of the ways that music specializes itself. So when I say that, I mean there's so many exciting things, and in sectors that one can go into as an urban designer that you can latch on, like things like festivals, and how we can think about this ephemeral cities that they create, these cities that they create when they come to in urban areas, or even rural areas sometimes, and how those sets are built. For me, I'm just like, it would be an exciting thing for me to get into, and interesting thing to even look at as a career path. I think it would be interesting. Something about music that really takes you to different places.
And it's quite hard to articulate the impact it has on you because it's like, this is such a weird thing, but it's also like music is everywhere, but not enough people necessarily talk it to the level that I'm trying to talk it to, though. So would you say music and urban design can be in some sort of interrelationship, or would you say one is more dependable on the other? Let me rather use an example. So in the case of Braam, because it's in a city and it's urban somewhat, would you say that the music culture has a great effect on the urban design that is in the area, or would you say it's the opposite?
I think it's they can influence each other, but sometimes they exist in spite of each other,
Okay.
right? So there's a lot of I think there's a lot of music, there's a lot of what is it? There's so much happening in terms of culture right now, where Braam is quite important. For example, the deep house scene has been very important in Braamfontein, especially when you look at like the different streets. So like your Kitcheners, I think the city in general, man, like even deep town, no, sorry, downtown, where deep town happens, right, has been quite important. So anything DJ, anything house, it doesn't even have to be deep house, man. It can be different types of house, electro, that exist despite of how Braam is made up. So for instance, there isn't a lot of spaces in Braamfontein where DJs and producers can host their events without having to either know someone in the city or pay something, right? Or be a famous DJ, right? So it's very difficult for example, to get some venues because you either don't have the money for it, or you just don't know the people, and the people, there's like they're not allowing you to enter the scene, for example, or will not almost block the access to that, right? So I think there's limitations in terms of how much people in the industry can make use of that space. There's a lot of quite a few buildings in Braamfontein that are not being used. There's not enough public spaces for people to be able to have events, for musicians to take advantage of the events without being blocked either by people who own those buildings or by municipalities who have like 1,000 bylaws before you can ever put together anything small. And remember, these are young kids. They don't have, one, you're a struggling artist, they can't afford. So you need the actual gig so that you can get income from it, some sort of income. So now you have to now pay like $1 million to to access the space. So it's like a lot of issues in terms of accessing space, right? So, and I think the way that people in the music industry have been able to almost force their way through Braam and been able to make a living through Braam has been, for me, phenomenal. For example, if you go to near that Kitchener's area, Juta corner, I mean, the vibe these kids are creating in that section, not only to show the fashion, but also to make a living, right? And I think it's happening despite of the space, because what they occupy mainly is the streets. And whoever is inside the buildings is because they can afford to be there, right? So it's difficult to really access the city and musicians to access the city. It's I think every year, called Fakugesi Festival, right? And you have these like young phenomenal people coming all over Africa and the world, who come to Joburg, and they find it so difficult to be in that space, and even driving to the space and getting there, and being there for a little while. It's so difficult. but they are able to do that despite, and they have it in Braam every single year. And then there's no reason why the city, for that moment, not make sure that these things are happening, and working with the artists and working with the people who are putting this festival together, to make it a success, right? Because it's like almost like they take it, like there's a whole program that goes into where it's like a relationship between Wits and that Tsemelechong precinct, right? And it's so difficult to access those two buildings, number one. Number two, to transverse between those two areas. It's so difficult and not safe, right? And it's dark, and where I wouldn't be surprised if they take it to another city next time, or if they just are thinking about changing the location because it's so difficult to access those two precincts, but to also just be around the space is so difficult. And they've had to make way to make it easier, but it hasn't. Urban design has not clicked into that and tapped into that in a way that's innovative, that can make more money. Also, how much a better experience that people can have if urban design clicked into these kind of festivals, into these kind of events, but even around music. I mean, there's I think it's First Thursdays happen every month in
Yes.
Braamfontein, right?
Yes.
And it's like these nooks of places that it's like, it's amazing. It's a whole entire vibe, right? So it's like,
Yes.
goddamn, and you like, it's unsafe though. Most of the time, I think it's possible that music can influence how a space is designed for the city that I'm talking about. But there's so much that urban design is not doing and is not allowing itself to be influenced. Instead, it does the opposite. It's a lot of, I mean, to your question again, I think these things can influence each other, but unfortunately, most of the time, music specializes itself in the city despite the urban design.
And like what you said, I picked up a lot of that. The music causes conflict, causes lack of urban management, but also not even lack of urban management. It highlights the lack of urban management, because there are so many abandoned, vacant spaces where if property managers and property developers and everyone involved in those spaces could create those spaces to be conducive for these young and unknown underground artists to use, it really could become a part of, like, it really could grow into become like a music strategy, a creative city, especially Braam, because I honestly think Braam is so musically driven and culturally driven, not just in the sense of music, but everything that comes with it, the fashion, the lifestyles, the restaurants, the energy that it comes with could really actually really benefit not just per se that demographic, but also it spills over to, especially because it's in such a youthful place where it attracts so many people, not from inside but from outside as well, that if we somewhat could use music to our advantage in urban design, it would really blossom into this creative city. And you can get economic employment and opportunities, and it really would just boost the whole social dynamic. But also I think it would increase properties because people would want to stay there and people would want to interact. Braam is so unique. You're not going to find this kind of setting anywhere else. Like, it will be, yes, maybe musically influenced, but it's going to be a completely different thing.
Yeah, but it's so sad, actually. It's very sad because there's so many incubators as well that have been to Braam but have not been able to keep up with the rates and all these things. So many young people that have tried to start businesses in Braam but can't keep up with the rates, and they've had to leave the city. So people are leaving like creatives are leaving the city, and it's sad because then we lose that. And I mean, you think about it, like it's the UJ and Wits in Braamfontein, right? And it's sad that they can't. None of that demographics can actually access the space.
Yeah, and it's ironic because it was formed or made by those people.
Yeah.
But now because it's like becoming this big thing or this bigger thing that we all didn't necessarily know was going to get to, it's becoming the opposite. Like people can't, like students, especially students in young professions, can't afford to go to those places because it's just becoming expensive. And then it's just like, well, this was naturally sort of plugged into the area, but now because you are taking it and you not necessarily taking advantage of it, but now you trying to elevate it, you leaving the people that have formed the space, and then it's just you're not going to get the same kind of attraction or kind of culture in it. It's going to lose its somewhat value to those people.
Yeah, I think it's also we should think about how the city can play a role in this as well. One of the biggest issues is that, I mean, private sector can only do so much, right? So the property developers can in the space can only do so much, and they can only be I don't think they're doing enough, but like they can only do so much, and they can only do so much if they are able to make sure that the city is also going to partner in with them in this. And once it starts, when the private sector starts feeling that they're only doing this alone, then they will shape the city how it works for them, how it benefits them. So there's so much that the city can play, the role that the city can play in these spaces, and work together with private sector to make a difference. And it's unfortunate that those relationships and networks are not formed for this.
Yeah, and that's how it becomes invasive.
Yeah.
South Africa has this problem of relationships. We don't know how to form continuous, healthy, functioning relationships because it will get to the point where it becomes one-sided, especially public and private. Just in Braam, the music culture is so significant. And then if you look at a national level, South Africa's music culture is so dynamic and forever changing, and it's so much more than just music. It's like we're losing out on an opportunity that could do great things for everyone.
I think there's a trust issue there. There's so many things, because there's no reason why Braam is not working the way that at its optimal. But I think public and private sector miss each other, and it's because of that miss. It's the way it is. And I thought COVID really brought an opportunity for people to rethink that, for the city to even rethink its policies. Because sometimes it's not really the public sector is not listening. It's just everyone is talking above each other, or they're talking past each other.
Yes.
And that's I think from what I've seen, actually it's unfortunate.
There's smaller things we can do still that could lead up to bigger things, but I think it would just take work. And the fact that Braam is really always changing every single year, like from just first year, which is 5 years ago for me, to now, it's completely different. I really do think, the music culture speaks really loudly and it overpowers everything else, that we should be using that to our advantage, but some spaces aren't, or there's just too much other conflict or mismanagement that happens.
Yeah.
Concluding remarks you would like to share? Or
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to your podcast. I guess.
Thank you for coming.